The Washington Mystics made 3 first-round picks on Monday night, and the next Mystics beat reporter Jenn Hatfield is here to break it all down for us. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and happy Friday. You are locked on to women's basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Today, we'll chat all about the Mystics draft picks, the team's upcoming training camp, and what to look out for as the season approaches in just under a month. Joining me today is the Next Washington Mystics beat reporter and managing editor, Jenn Hatfield. So Jenn, let's get right into it. The Mystics made 3 first-round picks Monday night, and they were all in the top 6. Who were they?
Yeah. So first of all, just thanks for having me back. Always fun to do this. But yeah, the Mystics had seemingly every pick in the top 6 on Monday night. Not quite, but it felt like it, getting them all rattled off so fast. So with the number 3 overall pick, they drafted Notre Dame guard Sonia Citron. And then right after that, number 4 overall, Kiki Iriafen, a forward from USC. Then they had a brief break while Golden State went ahead at number 5. And then at number 6, they were back on the clock and picked Kentucky guard Georgia Amore. So, a mix positionally, a mix of schools, lots of talent, lots of commonalities that the Mystics were looking for, though, and an exciting start to the draft for them.
And then we'll get to their other picks in a minute, but how does the trio fit in with what the team is looking to do this season?
Yeah, so probably the most obvious way is they're all young with tons of potential. The Mystics are in a rebuilding time right now, and they're specifically looking to build through the draft and through young players. So they kind of fit in right with where the Mystics want their core to be. And they've got a really young roster. So the trio of first-round picks will have opportunities to play and to be difference makers. But in terms of what the Mystics were looking for, all 3 fit the bill of what new general manager Jamila Weidman said that they were targeting, which is, competitive players who can play fast, who bring energy, who have high basketball IQs. That's kind of what they're looking to build around under first-year head coach Sydney Johnson. He's talked several times about wanting to play fast this year on offense, and Iriafen told us local reporters on draft night that Johnson told her that he wants to shoot within the first 8 seconds of the shot clock. So apparently he wants to play really fast. All these players can do that. If women's basketball fans have watched Georgia Amore, she can get up and run. Sonia Citron played on a Notre Dame team that was one of the best offenses in the country. And Kiki Iriafen promised really earnestly that she was going to sprint the floor. She knows how to do that. She said, I will be running. So it'll be, an exciting style to watch is what we're expecting with these 3, playing probably pretty decent sized roles.
And then who else did the Mystics select in the second and third round, and how did they fit in as well?
Yeah. So, oftentimes second and third round picks have kind of long odds of making a roster, but the Mystics have kind of a small roster for training camp, and the 2 picks that the Mystics had in later rounds are going to have plenty of opportunity to compete and even make the team. So that is great news for players drafted by the Mystics. So in the second round, they took Iowa guard Lucy Olson, and then they grabbed another guard in the third round, Alabama's Zay Green, who brings us some good size for that position too at 6'2". So the Mystics needed guards entering the draft. They had just 3 on the roster, and they picked up 4 in the draft, plus Iriafen, who's a forward and will add to the depth that they already have there. So lots of opportunities for all of these players, including the later round ones, to make their mark. Olsen and Green both really showed this year in their college seasons that they can be both primary scorers and big time facilitators, putting up big assist numbers. And whatever they can do in camp to kind of show both sides of that, I think will really go a long way for them.
And you touched on this a little bit, but how, maybe unusual is it in the WNBA to have 5 draft selections and all of them, really competing for spots on the roster, even though it's only a 12-person roster?
Yeah, so it's pretty rare. First of all, just having 3 first-round picks, it's only the 3rd time that's ever happened in WNBA history, and it's the first time the Mystics have ever had that. So they accomplished in the first 6 picks what most teams do in an entire draft in terms of just the sheer number of picks. Like they were busy. And then, the 2nd and 3rd round picks, like adding that brings in a lot of depth and talent, and they needed it. They frankly just did not have a lot of players on the roster entering the draft. They were pretty quiet in free agency as Jamila Weidman kind of got up to speed and got going in her role as the general manager. They didn't really make moves on draft day other than one trade that only sent one player on the move. So they've been pretty quiet as far as adding pieces so far. As of when we're recording now, just Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, they have not signed any undrafted players to training camp contracts, which is relatively common across the league. So what I'm kind of getting at is they've got a small group right now, 13 players on the roster, and they're going to carry 12. So you can do the math about the odds of people making the roster. And, a lot of those 12 spots are not set yet. So it should be a small but very competitive camp.
Yeah, and we'll get more into training camp later, but I mean, you kind of talked about it already. Did anything surprise you about draft day, draft night, maybe that trade?
Yeah, we can talk about the trade later. That was a little bit surprising, just not knowing that it was going to happen, but made lots of sense. And not so much surprising. I don't want to go that far, but in terms of just looking at what the Mystics did in the top 6, I think it was fair. Jamila Weidman was hired relatively late in the cycle. She was announced just before Christmas, but didn't really start her job for another month as she was transitioning from her role at the NBA. And I think it was fair to ask, when the Mystics ended up with 3 picks in this draft after trading Ariel Atkins away, it was fair to ask, does she have enough time to kind of deliver on these picks and maximize them? She had a staff around her, some of whom had been, scouting players throughout the college season and even before. But for a general manager to come in halfway through the season, there were some questions there. And I think that they did a really good job in this drafting, getting pieces that could be impactful players for them this season down the line. She spoke after the picks were all in. She talked about how the Mystics were trying to get better in the short term and the long term at the same time on Monday night, which can sometimes be a tough task. But I think the Mystics front office acquitted themselves really well on Monday night, which, nothing against Weidman specifically, but would be a question for any franchise that had a general manager, start in earnest that late.
And then, we can talk about the trade right now. Okay. Can you just break it down and the results of it?
Yeah, so the Mystics sent Carly Samuelson, who's a veteran player. She's 29 years old, was a starter for the Mystics last season, impactful on both sides of the ball. They traded her to the Minnesota Lynx, which is starting to be a favorite place to send former Mystics, in exchange for Minnesota's first-round pick in the 2026 draft. So as much as the Mystics liked Carly and respected, all the leadership and on-court ability and off-court abilities that she brought to the team, it made sense for where they are now, targeting young players, targeting building through the draft. Carly Samuelson's contract was going to expire after 2025 anyway, like nearly every veteran in the WNBA is going to. So effectively, they got something for nothing. And it'll be tough with they lose her leadership and don't have a ton of veterans on the roster right now, but it made all the sense in the world for their long-term vision.
Yeah. As you were talking about it, kind of sounds like it all goes towards that long-term vision of getting better in the now, or now-ish, with that pick next year, but also looking to build long-term again with that future draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
Well, coming up next, we'll talk about training camp, which somehow starts in just 9 days. Today's episode is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork has helped me find affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale my business efficiently. Visit upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's upwork.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. So we talked about the team getting younger, but the Mystics are in a unique spot. You wrote this in your story that came out on Wednesday. Mystics have 8 players with 2 or fewer years of WNBA experience and only 2 with 4 or more years. So what does the youth of this team mean for the team this season and in training camp specifically?
Yeah, I think it's interesting if you kind of compare this to a college roster, right? You basically have all these underclassmen and you've got 2 seniors or grad students on this roster, except that it's the WNBA. So seniors aren't, limited to a certain number of years of eligibility. So that I use that analogy to kind of just show that this could be a little bit daunting going against teams that have more, air quotes here, seniors, right? Players, except it's players now in the W who are 30, 35, in a few cases 40. So it's going to be definitely an interesting year seeing how the Mystics, develop their youth and use their youth. At this point, I think you basically don't want to have anybody seat get, too comfy on the bench, right? You want to rotate players in, kind of like what former head coach Eric Tebow was doing at the end of last season, just trying out combinations, seeing how different players work together, seeing, how they can develop or play different spots. So I think we'll see a lot of that kind of experimentation, particularly in this up-tempo offense that Cindy Johnson wants to play. You may need fresh legs more often than not if you're going to run around like this and fly around a little bit on defense. So I think it'll be really interesting to watch. I think it should be a fun style. I think there are a lot of players in here who are just naturally have a really fun style to watch. Georgia Amore comes to mind, Jade Melvin comes to mind, Shakira Austin comes to mind. These are all fun players to watch. So I think, it's going to be a season of development, and on some days, in some games, in some quarters, that youth might get exposed a little bit and it might be a little bit rough. But on other days, they're going to flash the potential because the season's about potential and building toward that. And I think we'll see some glimpses of it. It'll just be a matter of, does it look that way on the scoreboard? We'll see.
And then who are you expecting to emerge as a leader this season alongside those seniors or veterans in Sykes and Dolson?
Yeah, I think Shakira Austin is kind of the obvious answer. She's actually the longest tenured Mystic in terms of just consecutive years on the team, which is kind of crazy to those of us who remember her getting drafted not too long ago to the Mystics. But, the Mystics have kind of been preparing her to take a step forward with her leadership for a couple of years now. Her and Ariel Atkins were originally going to be kind of that young leadership nucleus, but now Ariel Atkins is with the Chicago Sky, and so Shakira is, I think, ready to make that jump if she's healthy. In particular, it's tough to be a leader when you're injured on the bench. It just is. You're not in the game doing it. So I think if she's healthy, she can make a big jump as a leader, and with her on-court game and her abilities there to take over games.
And then, with so many things up in the air, what are you hoping to learn by the end of Mystics training camp and as those preseason games get played?
Yeah, I think what I'll mostly be looking for is just, how that chemistry is developing and like between who and kind of which positions Sydney Johnson sees specific players in. So for instance, there's kind of a logjam in the post right now. You've got Kiki Ariefen, you've got Shakira Austin, you've got Aaliyah Edwards, you've got Steph Dolson, and that's before we even throw in Emily Engsler and Sika Kone. So can any of those players play the three? Emily Engsler probably can. Can anyone else? Brittany Sykes, is Sydney Johnson going to keep her at the point where Eric Thibault was, kind of fond of throwing her in there, or is he going to put her back on the wing because the Mystics don't have a ton of wings? So I'll be curious to kind of see positionally kind of where people shake out. I'll be curious, if Sykes does move back to the wing, does that clear space for Jade Melbourne to start at the point, which I think would be pretty fun. And then you could bring Amor off the bench. And so you'd get a little Aussie point guard for Aussie point guard substitution patterns. So I think there are a lot of fun player combinations in short. And I'm curious to see what Sydney Johnson's vision is for how he's going to use them and see those players kind of figure out how they work together in real time.
And then I know you kind of touched on this earlier, but, math is hard. Roster math is hard. Do you expect how many of the draft picks do you expect to make the roster?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell right now because there is the possibility that the Mystics add more players either before training camp starts or as we get close to that roster cut down date before the season opener. So as other teams have to make their cuts, do the Mystics pick anyone up that they think makes their roster better? The Mystics have done that in past years. So just because the Mystics have been relatively quiet in terms of adding players since free agency opened doesn't preclude them from doing it now. So, but with those caveats, we can't factor those in right now because we have no idea who those players would be. But as the roster currently stands, again, they've got 13 right now. 12 can make the roster and will make the roster because the Mystics need to pay some people to be on their roster. They can't carry 11. They'll go to 12. So for the 5 draft picks, or maybe even all 5 of them, if Green and Olsen are able to beat out some other folks on the roster. So it could be a banner year like this draft. If they really get, Lucy Olsen or Zay Green or both, as young players that they want to continue to develop, this could be remembered as a really great draft for the Mystics, down the line as they kind of reap the fruits of their rebuild.
And then, I kind of walked right into this question, but what excites you about this draft class and maybe their potential for the Mystics?
Yeah, I think it's fun, like in that they all kind of fill different holes on the roster. And so you don't really have any like two of a kind in this draft class, even though the Mystics got a lot of guards, which they sorely needed. They're not carbon copies of each other. Sonia Citron can play on the wing and does often play on the wing. Georgia Amor is a point guard. Zay Green is a big guard who can run the point. Lucy Olsen is a shooter. She could score, but she can also assist, so between all of them, they've got 1 through 3 filled very comfortably and bring different things. And then Kiki Ariefen kind of fits them all, fits that group very well as a versatile forward. So I think just how they fit together and kind of, seeing the vision of what the Mystics are trying to build, it's exciting that this is, Jamila Weidman's first draft class, and it'll be exciting to see kind of what their trajectory is, not just this season, but long term. Do they help the Mystics, get back to where they want to be?
Yeah, and with all that versatility, do you think that helps the team as it kind of rebuilds and has a new look to it, and under a first-year head coach as well?
Totally. They're going to have to adapt constantly this season. They're going to have a way that they want to play, but some nights they may need to play a little bit differently. They're going to need to rotate players in different spots. Like, anyone who's followed the WNBA knows that even a 12-player roster is pretty small, and it's hard to make a team when you just do one thing. And especially if you have injuries, players have to be like really, really ready to adapt. So I think the more that any player, not just these draft picks, but any of the players coming into camp can show, oh, I'm not just X, what you know me for in the W already, but I can do these other things. That's something the Mystics are going to be looking for. They, Jimmy Lowe-Weinman and Sydney Johnson kind of talked about this in their introductory press conference. Like, they don't want to box players into roles that they might have had previously, whether with the Mystics or otherwise. Like, they want to let them grow in whatever direction they're able to grow, both on and off the court. So versatility is kind of the name of the game here, and they got a lot of it. And it'll be exciting to see kind of how that fits with what the Mystics already have.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect segue. Coming up next, we'll talk about what excites Jenn about the upcoming season. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Plus, managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. So, the start of the season is just a few weeks away. What excites you the most about the season ahead?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be seeing the young players, how they respond to being kind of thrown in the fire in some cases. I'm excited to see, if we're talking about returners, I'm really excited to see if Jade Melvin can kind of take that next step. The path might be cleared for her a little bit, especially if Brittany Sykes moves off the ball and Julie Van Loo is now with the Golden State Valkyries after being picked in the expansion draft. So kind of the stage is set, depending on how Sydney Johnson wants to use her, for her to be getting a lot of minutes at point guard, which is, something she's been building towards. She's still really young, but she was on Team Australia at the Olympics last summer. I think she's ready to make a big jump, and I'm excited to see what that looks like for her. I'm excited to see, if Stephanie Dolson can continue on her excellent season last year. I don't think she got a ton of notice for what she was doing, in part because the Mystics struggled so much at the beginning of the season, but she was so efficient from three and so important in so many other ways for the Mystics. And if she can come even close to that, I think that's going to be huge for the team. She kind of sometimes too, I think, gets lost in the shuffle behind like Aaliyah Edwards and Shakira Austin and now Kiki Iriafen, but she is quietly really important to their success and perhaps even more this season, given just the dearth of veterans on this roster. So I'm excited to see kind of how she, embraces that role of being like, I don't know what they'll call her, like whether they call her like Grandma Steph or something, but that role, I think will be really fun to hopefully see that side of her. And I'm just excited for kind of, we have so many questions about what this is all going to look like. And I think that's kind of a exciting time to be able to have all these questions and see how they play out.
Yeah, definitely. No pressure, but if you ever do find out how they're calling or what they're calling Steph Dolson, could be a fun story. I will be sure to report out whatever I learn on this front. Yes, I'm so excited about that. Earlier in the week, I asked Michelle Smith this for the Golden State Valkyries. Do you have any bold predictions for this season, or maybe just predictions in general?
Ooh, I don't know if I have a whole lot of predictions yet, just because it's so new. I guess just looking at the Mystics depth chart, I don't know how bold this is. You can tell me if this is like spicy or not, but I think there's like a pretty good shot that Sonia Citron starts at guard right away from day one or close to day one, a la Ariel Atkins. It's kind of funny. So Sonia Citron came to the Mystics, like her pick, the number 3 overall pick, came over in the Ariel Atkins trade. And if you want a player to replace Ariel Atkins, Sonia Citron is not that dissimilar to what Ariel Atkins was coming out of Texas. So I think that could be, kind of a ready-made plugger in there next to Melbourne and Sykes at the, 1, 2, 3. So that's one prediction. Jade Melbourne starting at the point could also be a bold prediction if they move Sykes off the ball. But I think there's a lot of questions here. And I don't know how much I can predict at this point, but I'll throw those out there. You can tell me if they're spicy or tepid.
I'll accept them. Michelle's on the Golden State Valkyries Draft podcast was that the team won't finish last, which maybe some people will expect because they're an expansion team or whatever. But that's the level playing field for the bold predictions on Locked On Women's Basketball this week.
Okay. All right. I was hoping you were going to tell me she had a Julie Van Loo prediction, but that's okay.
No, but there was Julie Van Loo praise in there, I believe. Anybody, and you kind of touched on a lot of different people, but is there one or two people in particular that you think are poised for a breakout season?
Yeah, I mean, I've touched on a bunch of people. Who haven't I touched on? I think Aaliyah Edwards is someone we haven't talked a whole lot about on this podcast, but she's going to enter her second season. She kind of opened some eyes down at Unrivaled, right when she beat Brianna Stewart in the one-on-one competition, if that rings a bell for folks. So how much can she carry that forward into year 2? Part of that's going to be determined by what Sydney Johnson wants to do with his front court minutes, but you have to imagine she's getting a lot of those, regardless of who she's playing with. So I'll be excited to see what she does to kind of build on that season. And I think for her too, sometimes it's interesting, like a young player, things start to click for them when they have to kind of teach someone younger and bring them along. So she may become kind of like a mentor type to Kiki Uriathan, along with several other players. She won't be the only one, but does kind of showing her the ropes help Aaliyah as well? That's possible. So excited to see that. And then I was going to mention Emily Engsler, who this could be a little bit bold. I'm not necessarily predicting it, but if she, is comfortable playing the 3, I don't think the Mystics have a ton of depth there. And I think that she could, see a fair amount of minutes at the 3 and really get run that way. And I think we might be able to see like a little bit more of what she could do. She showed definitely flashes of it last season, especially as she got more minutes and kind of got more comfortable with her role. And she was working really closely with the player development staff and putting in a ton of extra time. So curious to see kind of where that takes her. The Mystics now have a new player development staff. So, how can those folks kind of unlock more from Engsler and from everyone on the roster? So that's something I'll be watching too and seeing if she can kind of carve out a spot, even though this front court is crowded.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today, Jen. Where can the people find you and your work?
Yeah, so you can find all of us at The Next at thenexthoops.com. And on social media, you can find me on Blue Sky at Jenn Hatfield or on Twitter at Jenn Hatfield 1, and that's Jen with 2 N's. I don't know what happens if you type it in with 1 N. You probably just go into a vortex somewhere. So make sure you do 2 N's.
Well, thank you again for joining me today, and thanks to our listeners for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And make sure to tune in tomorrow to hear from our WNBA Draft crew and every Monday through Saturday for more women's basketball coverage.